For this morning, we have one talk that we were not able to fit into yesterday's session, so Dave Randall very happily has agreed to shift his talk from yesterday to today, so we're very happy that Dave is here to give his talk. Ed will be the chair of the remainder of this session, and then after that we will very quickly transition to our panel discussion. So, Ed, please.
All right, so the last speaker from the session, which I remember was Next Generation Models, is David Randall, who is a professor at Colorado State University and has also worked at MIT and NASA and is known for his model development over his career.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I worked with Shukla at Goddard for about 9 years, and it was a very good experience. I learned a lot from you, Shukla, and the thing that I remember most is your ability to cut through BS and get right to the main issue. So nowadays, whenever I find myself getting into trouble, I ask myself, what would Shukla do? So the subject of my talk is related to the title, but not quite on the title, you'll see. I want to talk about deterministic and non-deterministic convection and a particular angle on this problem. So this actually connects with Tim Palmer's talk yesterday. This cartoon is supposed to illustrate the idea of deterministic convection, and the cursor isn't working. So I'm going to need a pointer, and I thought there was one. At any rate, the idea here is that the horizontal axis is some measure of forcing, changes in the weather from day to day, that may or may not promote convective activity. Thank you. And the vertical axis is a measure of the strength of the convective activity. You can pick your favorite measure. And this relationship here says that the convective response C is determined by the forcing in some presumably complicated way. And there's a simple one-to-one relationship. If we know the forcing, we can calculate the response. But we all know, red to green, I'll keep them both. We all know that, sorry about that, that the real convection is somewhat random. So we can imagine that for a given forcing, there might be a range of possible convective responses shown here. And the most likely value would be given by the number on the red line, but there are other possibilities. So there's an ensemble of possible realizations, and we get one of them on a given day. So if we think about this in terms of parameterization for models, I would say a deterministic parameterization is intended, at least, to simulate ensemble means or expected values, most likely values, of the convective response for a given large-scale weather situation. A non-deterministic parameterization should pick one realization from that ensemble of possibilities and deliver that one as the model runs. This distinction only matters if the range of possibilities is sufficiently broad. So we can ask some questions about this. It's one thing to say that there's a range of possibilities, but we should be asking what is the nature of the non-deterministic effects? It could be energy cascading down from larger scales. There is an energy cascade, but that's not the only possibility. There are instabilities on the small scales, convective instabilities in mesoscale systems, and so on. So what we get in practice may be determined or influenced by either of these two things, which could introduce some randomness. Then we can ask what sorts of weather conditions promote unpredictable but strong convective processes. If it's unpredictable and weak, we don't really care. But if it's unpredictable and strong, that could be important. And then, of course, the big question, how much does cloud-scale chaos affect large-scale weather and climate? We don't know. So it's possible that there are some important effects, and I'll come back to this at the end. And a little bit of a technical sort of modeling question. How do these effects change as the model resolution becomes finer? Do these effects become more important? You can think of reasons why they might. I'm not going to discuss that today, but I do have some thoughts on it. Okay, so I'm going to show you some things from the superparameterized community atmosphere model, same model that Christiana talked about yesterday afternoon, or a similar version. And I'm going to be talking about forcing and feedback, and this diagram illustrates what I mean. So here's the global model with its relatively coarse grid, and in every grid column here, we embed a cloud resolving model. That's the idea. And the cloud resolving model is what's called the superparameterization. It takes the place of the conventional parameterizations of the GCM. We simply strip them out or comment them out or something. So we have a forcing from the GCM to the cloud resolving model that is associated with adiabatic processes, like advection. And then the CRM feeds back by providing heating and drying to the GCM. Each of the cloud resolving models in the many columns of this GCM runs continuously. They're not restarted every physics time step or anything like that. The CRMs don't communicate with each other except through the GCM. And they're coupled in such a way that they remain in sync. And I have to talk to you a little bit about how the coupling is done, because otherwise the last part of my talk won't be understandable. So when someone asked me how a GCM works, I showed them this picture. Physics and dynamics, okay? It's a dance, forcing and feedback. And this is the choreography, just in a simple way. So the GCM variables with the subscript G are time step forward. And here we have just the adiabatic part of the time step, the dynamics. And so it's not a full time step, and to indicate that, we put a tilde on top of the QGN plus 1. It's not really the end of the time step yet. Then we take a lot of smaller time steps with the cloud resolving model to span one longer GCM physics step. And the cloud resolving model has its own adiabatic processes, notably vertical advection by the convective system. It also has sources in sync, so phase changes, radiation, and so on. And then this term represents the forcing from the GCM. So this is how the CRM finds out what the GCM has been doing. We have the difference between the provisional end of time step value influenced by the advection in the GCM. The difference of that from the horizontally averaged, pointy brackets, horizontally averaged cloud resolving model values of Q. And this is a kind of a relaxation towards QGN plus 1. And then, of course, we need the feedback. So here we let the GCM finish its time step by adding in the difference between the cloud resolving model at the end of these steps, so updated by its physics and its advection, and the sort of provisional halfway through physics, GCM time step. So forcing feedback. Now, with a little algebra substituting from up here, you can derive this. And good, you can see the yellow. So if you compare this to this, you see they're the same, except that this is the GCM value at n plus 1, and this is the horizontally averaged cloud resolving model value at n plus 1. So those two numbers must be the same, and that's a good thing, because we don't want the two models to drift apart, right? We want the same planet. So in the dance of forcing and feedback, the CRM and the GCM move together. Now, a superparameterization is non-deterministic because the cloud resolving model is a nonlinear dynamical system. It is sensitively dependent on its initial conditions, and it produces an individual realization. So a question we could ask, is there a way to explore the ensemble of possible realizations from the cloud resolving model for a given GCM weather situation? And I want to explore the possibility of using what I call doppelgangers. Instead of one CRM per GCM grid column, we'll have n, where n is a positive integer, possibly bigger than 1. All copies of the cloud resolving model see the same GCM weather. The CRMs are perturbed at the cold start time, so they have slightly different initial conditions, but the GCM itself is not perturbed. Each copy of the CRM runs independently of the others as usual. So this is the idea. This is what I showed you before. Now we've added this guy. There's advective forcing from the GCM, but no feedback. Okay. This doesn't work because without feedback, the doppelganger drifts. And a similar kind of drift can occur when the cloud resolving model is driven by observed adductive forcing if you're running a case with ARM data or something like that. Right? CRM can sort of go its own way. And that's why you don't run them for a year. So it takes two to tango. But we can do this. Instead of just what I showed you before, we can ensemble average the heating and drying from the two CRMs and feed that back to the GCM. And this is essentially what a deterministic parameterization tries to do, to feed back the expected value of the heating and drying. And with this approach, it turns out that the cloud resolving models don't drift away from the GCM for essentially the same reason I explained before. So let's try that. Experimental design, low resolution model, finite volume dynamical core, two cloud resolving models to start, 32 columns each, north-south, 4 kilometer grid spacing. And we just took the initial conditions from an earlier round of the model, and we cold started the CRMs, as you'll see in some of the slides, just because that was the easiest thing to do. We'll stop doing that here next week. So here's 10 days in January, and it's just two CRMs. So this is number 1, this is number 2. This is the difference, and you're just looking at surface precipitation rate. So I know you can't see the details, but you know these look pretty much alike. They're 10-day average precipitation, January. And this looks very noisy, but the pattern of the noise, of course, matches the maxima here, more or less. So we explored this a bit, and I won't show you more from this because I want to go to n equal 10. Okay? Let's make the ensemble bigger. Now we have 10 individual realizations, same idea. This is the ensemble mean of the 10 realizations. It's obviously smoother, as we would expect, but the same general shape. And the range of differences in the globally average values here, which you cannot read, is less than about 0.1 millimeters per day. So just as an illustration, here's 10 days in the life of one particular GCM grid column. These are Hub-Millers. Time is increasing up, and this is distance across the cloud resolving model, 32 columns. So 10 different CRMs, all in the same weather regime. Remember, they were cold started. So down here at the bottom, nothing much is happening, although in a few cases you can see some activity. But in many of them, it waits for 120 hours or so. And you can see that the weather in the different CRMs is broadly similar, but not quite the same. The point used here is somewhere about there. So we picked a place where it was raining quite a bit, otherwise it would be a rather boring slide. Okay. Not particularly interesting, but I have to show this. This is the standard deviation over the ensemble averaged across the tropical oceans. And this is 10 days. So it takes a day or two to come up to speed from the cold start, but it saturates at about 1.5 millimeters a day, ensemble mean. Now, I said earlier that this is going to be interesting if there are cases in which the precipitation is strong and also unpredictable. So this slide is supposed to sort of show you where that is happening. We're looking at the same 10 days with 10 CRMs. And what's plotted down here is the fraction of the time, 0 to 1, that the coefficient of variation is bigger than 0.2. The coefficient of variation is the standard deviation over the ensemble divided by the mean. Okay, so it's non-dimensional. And in addition to this being bigger than 0.2, which seems big enough to be interesting, the average precipitation rate at the same place is bigger than 10 millimeters a day. So if those two conditions are satisfied, we plot a color, otherwise it's white. And you can see there's quite a bit. Okay? So there's a fair amount of variability here. This is based on 20-minute averages. Now, if we did the same thing based on, let's say, one-day averages, the colors would be, or the numbers would be smaller. Right? So it's going to depend on the averaging interval. But it looks intriguing. I think maybe about 3 hours or so would be a good length of time to average over. So what I want to do with this is can be boiled down to these two things. So first of all, of course, we want to see if the climate is different between ensemble mean feedback, like what I just showed you, and feedback from a single realization, which is the standard SPCAM. Okay, and two things that you can think of that might be different are extreme precipitation events. This will almost certainly be different, right? Because when you ensemble average, you'll take really heavy rain events and average them together with not so heavy. So this is bound to stand out somehow, but we don't have numbers. We want numbers. And then there might be systematic differences in large-scale weather systems, like it's been suggested the MJO. I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical about that, but we can try it and see. And then we want to ask, how does this actually work? Okay, so the advantage of having the cloud resolving model there that's growing individual clouds and where you can actually identify specific cloud processes, even including some types of mesoscale organization in a crude way, is that you can try to understand what are the weather circumstances that allow the possibility of heavy precipitation, but also have a significant amount of uncertainty. And so we'll go in and try to figure that out. That's my talk.
Thanks, Dave. So that looks to me like a application of what Ben Kirkman calls interactive ensemble.
Something like that.
So, very interesting. Any questions from the audience? Kevin? Kevin? Oh, okay. You came?
Very nice indeed. I wonder if you could also try two-dimensional.
Yeah, we can do this in 3 dimensions. Let's say you have 64 CRM columns. Instead of arranging them in a line of 64, you can arrange them in an 8x8 square. And we've done that. Actually, we did that 10 years ago. But the problem is, if you have 4-kilometer boxes in an 8x8 arrangement, it's only 32 kilometers wide, and that's not really big enough to do deep convection. So we can explore that possibility. You can also do this with NICAM, of course, if you have about 1,000 times more computer time.
Hi, Dave. My comment may be a little bit related. The cloud resolving model runs as a 2D model, is that correct? And so have you considered reorienting each of the different members so that they're not all oriented the same way? And what does that do to the thing?
We've experimented with changing the orientation, but we haven't done what you just said. It could be done, and I invite anyone here to do it. The model's available. I'm going to do this instead.
Dave, we see some impacts on things like MJOs from the stochastic schemes, but only when you apply some spatiotemporal correlations to the noise. So they have to kind of sense, correlations have to spill over from neighboring grid boxes. As I understand it, your sort of the scheme you talked about wouldn't have that type of process incorporated. Is that right? Or is there other ways of generalizing?
The CRMs and neighboring GCM grid columns are not bolted together. But Mike Pritchard and Gabe Cooperman and others have shown that They can simulate the propagation of convective systems from the Front Range in Colorado to Chicago during the nighttime hours, despite that fact. So there is coupling, and it comes through the GCM itself, and it seems to be good enough to give you some types of convective propagation that we see in nature and that the conventional GCM does not do. So I'm not sure about the answer to the question.
You mentioned the CRM drifting to the point that you wouldn't want to do real long I'm here.
Mike.
You wouldn't want to do real long integrations. Did you have a feeling what would be the length of an integration? How far do you think you can go before that happens?
Well, with this ensemble, I'm trying to scroll up here. With this approach, there's no significant drift. This is the approach where we get drift, and here the drift happens in the first day or two, so it's right away.
Hi Dave, in the chart you show the unexpected heavy rain events. I noticed the distributions are all in the tropic. There's nothing in the exotropics, and so I'm just wondering, is there other ways? Maybe if you use more of a local criteria, we should be able to see also more of the jet stream type overland regions. Yeah.
Well,
you
yeah,
use a absolute. Oh yeah, you did use an absolute.
There's a little bit going on in the exotropics, but of course it's mostly in the tropics. I mean, that's where the heaviest rain is. I'm actually interested to see what happens in Central North America in July.
Yeah, but if you do a local criteria, like a rain precipitation by local standard, then
Yeah, by
you
local
see
standards.
more of that extreme events.
Yeah, that's
in
possible.
exotropics. That's.
Last question.
It is done globally at every grid point. But there are so few grid points in the globe where deep convection takes place. Is it possible to do selectively and then do more? Have you thought about that?
Yes, it's possible to do that, but life is too short. I don't want to.
Okay, let's thank all the speakers from the session.